Hey friends, Patrina here with Homegrown Florida. It's been a crazy busy week in our winter garden and we have gotten a lot done, right? We started a bunch of kind of different flower seeds that somebody sent me. I'm going to show you that. We thinned our carrots, we planted our potatoes. I canned some cranberry sauce from cranberries that I had left over from Thanksgiving. And then today's going to be the challenging day because we need to prune a bunch of our fruit trees and bushes, but we got some weird stuff happening over in the little mini orchard that I have, mainly because it's 78 degrees today and peachy, and many of the other fruit trees are thinking that it's spring, and it's not spring. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with that. So hang out with me through this whole week of winter gardening in Florida. So we're starting out with Monday, the beginning of the week, and I decided that I was going to get my white potatoes in. And I'm doing 3 different varieties. I have struggled with white potatoes for, I think it's been 2 years now. So I had some Yukon Gold potatoes that I had harvested from my last harvest, which really wasn't a lot. I ordered some new seed potatoes. I get these from Grand Teton Organics. So I did get the Yukon Golds, but I started thinking that maybe my struggles are not, climate or environmental or my soil. Maybe it's my variety. So while yes, I did get some Yukon Golds, I also picked up 2 other varieties. This next variety here is called a Cal White. I'm very much into the white and yellow potatoes and not so much into like red potatoes. We just don't eat them a lot. So I've laid out the Yukon Golds and I've laid out the Cal Whites in, kind of an order of where I want them to be. This last little batch here are called Golden Nuggets, which I think is just the cutest name ever. But they are a yellow potato and I'm super excited about these. I picked all of these varieties because they have a very short days to harvest. They're a smaller size potato because when you're growing potatoes in Florida, you have a couple periods of time. And if I would have started these earlier, like in late fall, I probably could have gone with a Kennebec, some sort of russet potato, where I could end up with a baked potato. But because I'm starting these kind of late for me, I have to go with a shorter days to harvest variety. And all of these guys are the shortest that I could find, which is about 90 days. That's 3 months. So that puts us into almost like April-ish time frame, which here in Florida, April is very hot and potatoes just do not grow well in the heat. They'll actually sprout underground, and once they've sprouted underground, they actually don't hold very well. You can still kind of eat them, break the sprouts off and eat them, but if you want to maintain the harvest and be able to, store it inside your pantry or inside a refrigerator or whatever kind of cold place that you can store them, you really don't want any that have sprouted. So I really needed to get stuff that was just super quick. So the way that I plant my potatoes, I've done them a bunch of different ways. This is kind of my lazy method, which is I'm digging a hole, and I'm digging a hole about as far down as I possibly can. And these were about 6 to 8 inches, I believe. So I've dug the hole in some really loose soil. I picked beds where I had recently added some new compost in, and I had, several inches of this stuff. So it wasn't very compacted. It was nice and light and fluffy. Once I've made the hole, I'm adding in some composted chicken manure. It is a fertilizer that I get from Azure Standard. It's called Nutra Mix, I believe is the name of it. It has a good, nice, even nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus mix. And I'm putting that down into the planting hole and I mix it around a little bit with that native soil. And then I put the potato down into it and I cover it back up with the soil. And that soil was that mix of compost and, topsoil that I had gotten from Whitwam Organics. So I'm very hopeful that all of this nutrition is going to feed these potatoes through their entire life cycle. My goal would be not to have to add any more fertilizer above and beyond what they're getting right now, but you know, we'll watch the plants and we'll see if they look stunted or if their leaves start to yellow. And if that starts to happen, then I'll probably add a liquid fertilizer to them. And when it comes time to harvest, once they've all started to look crappy and die back, and I go to harvest them, I want to make sure that I'm picking a day where there is little to no rain in the forecast for at least, it would be great if I could get 7 days, but that's not typical here. But if I could get at least 3 or 4 days where there hasn't been any rain, I'll be happy with that. Now it's just a matter of getting all of these little holes dug and get all of these potatoes down into the ground. And they kind of fit perfectly in this, I don't know, I guess it ended up being 2 half beds. The original goal in my spring planning was to put them in just one single bed, but unfortunately, you know, some of the things hadn't finished yet, and so they ended up extending into 2 separate beds. It should be fine. It's actually helpful because I know that where the Yukon Golds are, the Cal Whites, and the Golden Nuggets. I recently got some really cool flower seeds in the mail from one of my viewers, Bill. He sent me a bunch of these really interesting, uncommon flowers, and I'm so stoked to grow them. I'm probably starting them a little too early, but that's okay, because I am going to keep them protected. I'm going to put them in these little pots and start them and cross my fingers. Most of them I actually started last night. Let me see if I can show this to you without spilling them all. So I nicked the seeds. I think that's called scarification or something like that. It's basically where you take like a nail file and you scar the edge of the seed so that way it more easily germinates. And then I soaked them overnight in water. So that's my first step. My next step is I'm going to fill each one of these halfway. This is a compost, well, it's part compost, part soil, so it's a 50-50 blend. So I'm going to start with the compost in the bottom of the pot, and then the top of the pot I'm going to use my Pro Mix, what I'm kind of using as like a seed starting mix at this point, on the top. And this is going to be better for the germination of the seeds on the top, and then as they get bigger and growing down into the roots, they'll get to the compost and everything, so that way they have some food. I'll also be fertilizing and feeding them as we go, but this will give them a nice, good start. Next step is we are going to water these so that they get nice and moist. I'm going to water them from the top, and I'm also going to water them from the bottom. So, okay, we got them all laid out, and so what we're growing is yellow rain lilies, some bachelor's button, a Confederate rose, which I think is also called a paper rose. It's actually in the hibiscus family. Larkspur, dwarf yellow ponciana, blackberry lily, and then there is a petunia, because I absolutely love petunias. I think this is what started the conversation with Bill and I. He had a petunia exorta. He says grows really, really well, so I'm super stoked to try them. I didn't soak the petunias because they are such a tiny seed. Usually tiny seeds like that don't necessarily need it, but all the rest of them were of decent size, so I went ahead and soaked them. So I'm just going to create a little hole in the center of each one of these pots here. And I went with bigger pots mainly because I knew that they were going to be living in these pots for a while. It's going to be a while that they're here before I put them in their forever place. Some of these guys are going to be going up front. Some of these guys are going to be staying in the garden. I haven't decided all that yet. So we're going to start with the rain lilies. And all that I'm going to do is actually, since they're already in water, I'm just going to pour the water and the seeds into that little spot. Just make sure they all make them into there. There you go. And then I'm going to take the soil and kind of cover it up. And stick my little label in. Let's do the rest. And then the last one I'm going to do is the petunias. And I'm going to do these a little bit different. These are super tiny seeds. And I think that they're probably going to produce like a bundle of plants. And I'm not going to use all of them, just in case I don't do well or they don't like this time of year or something. I want to have, you know, like a backup. So let's see here. You packaged them so nicely for me. Thank you, Bill. So excited. Okay, so let's see here. Tiny, bitty, itty bitty seeds. I don't even think you guys could barely see those, right? Okay, so I'm just going to kind of sprinkle them all over. There's probably, I don't know, 50 in my hand. That's how tiny these are. Okay. But it's a numbers game sometimes with seeds. Sometimes with seeds, you just put down as many as you possibly can and hope that some come up. Well, that's exactly what's happening here. All right, now that we got all the seeds done, I am going to spray the tops, especially those petunias, because they got kind of placed all over the top of the soil. The rest of them, I'm just going to make sure that we have a nice, even, wet surface on the top. Most of the other seeds were fairly larger. The petunias were tiny. I mean, if you think carrot seeds are tiny, petunias almost look like specks of dust. That's what they look like. I'm not even sure how they can grow from that, but they do. They grow beautiful flowers from that. Okay. Now that we have that done, I'm also going to take my cutest little watering pitcher here. Take the little top off because I just want to pour some down into the bottom here. Just to get the bottom of these super wet because they're going to take, I don't know, probably a couple hours to completely absorb all that water up through the bottom. And if I come out here in a couple of hours and there's still some water in the bottom of the tray, I'll throw it out. But right now, this was super dry soil. Very, very dry soil, so I'm fairly certain it's going to be able to take a lot of that moisture. And put my little cap back on. And now every day that I walk by these out here, when I go to take my dogs out, I'm going to keep this water bottle right next to it, and I'll just kind of mist the top until I start to see some sprouts. And hopefully in spring, we'll have some beautiful flowers all throughout the garden. We've made it to Wednesday, and Wednesday is my carrot thinning day. And thinning carrots is not really my most favorite task to do in the garden, but it is necessary, at least the way that I'm doing it this year. Last year when I grew my carrots, I broadcasted the seeds, which is just a really fancy term for I tossed them into the bed on the top of the soil and pretty much ignored them. And I had a lot of carrots come up, and I ended up with an inconsistency in terms of size. I got a great harvest, but the sizes of the carrots were very inconsistent. Some were small, some were big, some were fat, some were long. It was really just all over the place. Well, this year I kind of want to aim to get carrots that have similar sizes. I'd like them to be a long, thick carrot. And so the best way to do that is to make sure that these carrots have some distance in between them, and I'm aiming for about 2 inches. So not a lot of distance, but when I seeded these, some of the seeds kind of dropped in one spot, and I'll end up with a clump of them. And so you have to thin those out. Otherwise, those carrots are going to be incredibly tiny. Carrots are very, very sensitive to competing plants around them. Now, I've seen some people where they pull them up by the root and then replant them. I've never actually tried to do that before. They just seem like they're just such a sensitive plant that, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it would work. But like I said, I've never tried it. So it is possible that it does work. What I like to do is take my tiny little snippers here and I just move the plants around looking at the base, and then I find where there's a clump of them, and then I'll cut right at the base of the soil the plants that are in between each other. So I get rid of that clump and I make sure that there's 2 inches in between each one of the plants that I want to remain. This year I'm growing 4 types of carrots. I have my new Kudrow carrots. They're a very heat tolerant, solid orange, just standard carrot, but man, are they good. They're nice and sweet and just what you're looking for in a carrot. I also have some purple elites. I have some cosmic red. And then I can't remember what the last one is, but I was going for colored carrots. I wanted my new Kudrow orange carrots, but I really loved some of the purples and reds and yellows. So I did plant rows of those. And what I did was I did 2 rows of each kind. So you can see that there's a little bit of rows right there. So I'll have the first 2 rows of the new Kudrow, and then there's 2 purple elites, and then there's 2 cosmic reds, and then there's 2 of that other kind that I can't seem to remember the variety right now. I will do this thinning one more time. I think I've gotten good progress on this first thinning. I really do feel like it's possible that maybe 75% of these are going to be fine and I won't have to do any more thinning. But I did leave some where I saw that the seedlings were kind of wimpy. They weren't really strong yet. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if all of these are going to make it. So I don't want to, thin too many of them, because if I thin the wrong one and one of them dies off, then I'm left with this blank open space. So there is a little bit that I left behind for, the natural process of some carrots making it and some not. On Thursday, I decided that I was going to have a canning project. So this is our preservation project. I had some cranberries that I had gotten at the store on a really good sale during Thanksgiving, and I've had them sitting in my freezer, and I wanted to get them out. And I wanted to not just make cranberry sauce, I wanted to make cranberry juice. Now there's 2 ways that you can make cranberry juice. The first way is you can actually just toss a bunch of cranberries into your jars and then fill them with water and sugar if you want, and can them, water bath can them that way. I didn't want to go that route because I had done some research and I came to realize that the potency or the strength of that cranberry sauce is going to be not as strong. And what I really want is a super, super strong cranberry sauce. Mainly because I plan on using this in 2 ways. I plan on using this as a juice, just, a nice, juice in the middle of summer that's very hydrating. But I also like to use this for urinary health. Cranberry is really, really well known for being great for urinary health and urinary tract infections. And it's actually the reason why during this recipe I don't add any sugar is because I want it to be a super concentrated liquid that I can later add honey or sugar or whatever else I want at a later time, or I can drink it straight if I'm using it for urinary health. So what I did was I took 1 bag of cranberries and 1 quart of water, and I boiled it on the stove for 10 minutes. I drained off the cranberries, I put them back in the pot and added a pint or a half. I boiled that for 10 minutes, strained that off, took the remnants of those cranberries, put them back in the pot, and did another half, which would have been half a pint of water. This ended up giving me 3 pints of cranberry juice. Now, if you wanted to add sugar to your cranberry juice, you would want to do that kind of at this phase where the liquid is still hot but not boiling, because when you add sugar to cranberries, cranberries have natural pectin, and so it could cause it to become jelly-like or jam-like. And so you want to wait till it cools down just a tiny bit. You do not want to be boiling cranberry juice with your sugar. Add your sugar afterwards, let it dissolve, and then put it into your jars. Once you have your cranberry juice in the jar, you're going to get some lids that have been soaking in hot water. Put the lids on the top after you've wiped down the top of the jar. I didn't use any sugar, so this really wasn't like a super concern that the lids weren't going to take. But if you're using sugar, you want to make sure that there's no sugary syrup on the rims of your jars. Put your lids on, screw your rings on fingertip tight, and then you're going to submerge them in boiling hot water. And they need to sit in that boiling hot water, full boil, full rolling boil for 25 minutes. Once you're done processing them, you're going to take them out of the water bath canner and place them on a kitchen towel and let them sit overnight for 24 hours. Since I already was in the process, I went ahead and canned some jam as well. It's a very similar process, but in this process, you add the sugar during the boiling process and you allow it to cook down. You can also add pectin. On Friday, I wanted to prepare for the tree trimming. So what I need to do is I need to get my tools all cleaned up, and I do this probably about twice a year. I was not really good at taking care of my tools when I first got them. And so you're going to see like a lot of rust and a lot of, just they don't look great. They don't look brand new. They're what I like to call very well used and very well loved. So I have all of the different kinds of snippers and loppers and all the tools that I use in my garden. And I just laid them out onto a towel. I sprayed them with a degreaser. I like to use Simple Green, and then I take this little toothbrush that I have for this purpose, and I really scrub them down really, really well. After I've scrubbed them down a couple of times, I'm going to dip them into the water, scrub a little bit more, make sure that everything that was on there that's kind of gunky and grungy and stuff is coming off. I'll wipe them down and make sure that they're completely dry. And then what I like to do is, because I still have a little bit of like gunk there, I like to take some sandpaper. I usually have this soft sandpaper block, but I couldn't find it. So I ended up using sandpaper from one of my husband's tools. And I'm doing two things here. I'm getting off any of that excess, garden debris that's still on there, while at the same time I'm actually using the sandpaper to sharpen my tools a little bit. I will warn you that when you use a heavy grit sandpaper like what I'm using right here, you're getting scratches on your tools. The softer grit sandpaper, or those blocks of sanding blocks, they work a lot better for this. So if you have that opportunity, definitely use one of those instead of just using a hard grit sandpaper like what I'm doing here. Now I go through each one of my tools and I really shave them down, and I make sure that they're nice and sharp by the time that I'm done with this process. My last step in my tools is to spray them with a silicone spray. My tools tend to like get stuck together. I don't know if you guys have that same problem, but after using them for a while, either the rust of our climate here, or some of the plant debris getting stuck inside there kind of gets them to where they don't want to open and close easily. So using this silicone spray really helps that. And I just spray it and I let them sit for a little while, let it get into all the cracks and crevices of all of the mechanisms. And then I will open and close the tools multiple times, just to make sure that that silicone is making its way into all of the little mechanics of the loppers and tools. And then I don't wash that off. I just kind of wipe off the excess from it, because you still want that silicone to live down inside of the tool mechanisms. I'm still working them back and forth just to make sure that, that they're opening and closing very easily without much resistance. And so this I let sit overnight, and I just make sure that they're nice and dry and working well before we get into our big project, which is pruning our fruit trees tomorrow. It's the next day and it's time to tackle these fruit trees. This is what Peachy looks like right now. She did a great job last year. She gave me somewhere between 60 and 70 peaches, but as you can see right here, we got flowers. That is not ideal right now. She should not be producing flowers, but it's probably because of the winter that we're having. This winter has been unlike any winter I have had since I started growing food 6 years ago. In my area, we get frost and we get temperatures down into the 30s, the low 30s, and sometimes even the 20s. Last year, I think we got down to like 26 degrees for 2 nights in a row. This year, we haven't gotten below 40 yet. And I say yet because I'm still hopeful that that's going to happen. And there's a reason why I'm hopeful, right? Peachy needs a certain amount of chill hours. And chill hours occur the number of hours that the temperature is below 45 degrees. And right now, the last time I checked, we were only at about 94 chill hours, and she needs at minimum 150 hours. So I'm very hopeful that we get a frost or some more really low temperatures. It'd be great if we didn't get a frost, you know, because I got tomato plants that are still growing that have not needed any protection whatsoever. But the only way I'm really going to get into that 150 to 200 hours of chill is we need something, some sort of really good cold front to come through. If we don't get that, if I don't get enough chill hours, she will flower, she will not fruit. So I'll have a nice, pretty, fluffy tree, but I won't get peaches this year if that happens. The fact that she's throwing off flowers right now kind of tells me that she thinks it's spring. Because we have these really warm daytime temperatures. It's fluctuating between, 40s at night, and today it was 78 degrees during the day, which is just insane. And so my hope is that by giving her a nice hard prune, that she will push herself back into dormancy, realize that she's not ready, and slow down a little bit. I work on pruning my trees in 4 steps. My first step is I work on my leader. Peach trees should not have a leader. I did not know this when I first got Peachy, and unfortunately her leader is too large at this point for me to take off. So what I did is a modified leader, which makes her kind of a tall, skinny tree. And so I want to take off all of the branches that are attached to that leader except at the very, very top. And then the second step I do is I kind of take off all of those branches that are facing inwards on the inside of the tree. And there's a lot of little ones here, so I'm snipping them off as we go. And after I'm done doing that leader, I then go to all the scaffold branches, which are the main branches that come off out away from the center of the tree. And I do that same process of taking out all of those little skinny branches that are pointed to the interior part of the tree, leaving just the branches that are sticking to the outside of the tree. Another thing I'm going to be looking for is this right here, where I have branches that are overlapping. They're also growing in a funny direction, right? But they're touching other branches. And so I have to make a choice at which one I want to take. And I end up taking this one because the other side of the tree is a little less full. And this side of the tree, the left side of the tree, is a little more full. So I want to give the right side more of a chance to fill out and the left side calm it down a little bit. You're also going to be looking for branches that are kind of sticking straight up instead of out away from the center of the tree at that 45-degree angle. Here's another one where we have 2 that are touching, and I have to make the decision of which one I'm going to get rid of. I'm once again looking towards which one grows better. The one on the right has more of that 45-degree. The one on the left looks like it has, more of a, 30-degree, 25-degree. So I didn't want to take it completely off, so I decided instead of cutting it all the way down to the base, I'm actually going to top it towards a bud that's going to point away from the tree. Here's another example of 2 that are touching. This one on the bottom half is growing kind of straight up, and then the one above it is doing that nice 45-degree angle. So I'm going to go right to the base here, clip that guy off. I walk around the tree at this point and I'm just kind of looking. I've made quite a bit of cuts, but I'm still looking, is anything touching? Is anything pointing inwards? Is anything, look odd? It's not at that nice 45-degree angle that I want. It's sticking straight up. anything that I might have missed. And I just do this multiple times, just walking around, stepping back, looking at the tree, making sure I like the shape, making sure that it's even, that the left side's not too heavy and the right side's really light, or vice versa. The final step that I'm going to do is a process called topping or head cuts. And this is where I want to make the tree shorter. I do this mostly during the summer, but she needs it now too. So I'm going to look for my highest branches, and then I'm going to look for a bud. This is there's little buds all along the edge of each one of the branches. And so what I want to do is I want to find which bud it is that is pointing in the direction that I want the tree to grow. Because that little bud, when you clip right above it, that little bud is going to start growing, and it's going to grow in the direction that it's pointing at. So depending on where that bud is on that branch is how I decide if I'm cutting it at the tippy top or if I'm cutting it much further down. Like this one right here, I'm having to pick, like there's a lot of buds on here. I want to find the one that's pointed in the right direction. So, oh, there it is. And I snip it. It's snipped pretty short, but it's going in the direction I want. And everything, all the buds above that were not. So I want to encourage it to focus pointing outwards and not inwards, or to the left or to the right, depending on if I want the tree to fill out more on one side versus the other. So you can see here we're looking up at the tree, and I'm standing on a footstool. This will not be easy for me if I don't get this tree shortened, because when it comes time to pick the fruit, I'm going to be out here with a ladder, and that is not ideal for me. I don't mind having Peachy be a little bit tall because of that leader that I have growing in the center that's not supposed to be there, but I don't want to have to break out a full-size ladder to get the fruit off. So I want to make sure that I am trimming up her at the top so that it's as short as possible, so that if I need to break out a little footstool, that's fine, or if I need to just kind of grab the branch and pull it towards me to get the fruit off, either one of those are fine with me. But it's not ideal to break out a full-size ladder to try to harvest her once a year. Once we've done all of the top cuts, this is what Peachy now looks like. I know it looks a little bare, looks a little weird, but this is actually what they are supposed to look like. Her right side is a little less full than her left side. So that's something that I'm going to continue to work on. I might still take a couple branches off of that left side so that way it's more even. I like the tree to look even. Now this little guy right here, this is a plum tree. There's not a lot of cuts I need to do here. It's fairly young, it's only a year old, but these two branches right here I'm not going to mess with at all. These are branches I'm going to use for grafting, which I'll show you in an upcoming episode once I make sure that I've done it correctly. I've never grafted a tree. I attempted a certain kind of graft last year that didn't work out well at all. So I'm grafting the tree this year. So if I can get it to work, I will share that with you guys. And the main reason why I want to graft this is plum trees require two trees. They need two different varieties that cross-pollinate each other, and I don't have room in my yard to put another plum tree. So what I have instead is I have a plum tree in a pot, and what I do is I use that plum tree, I keep it alive just to become the scion wood for the grafting. Once I can get this successfully grafted, that tree is going to go away, be gifted to somebody or given away or something like that. But back to pruning, I'm not going to focus on those two branches, but I am going to focus on the rest of them. You can see she's very heavy on the left side and she's very light on the right side. So I have to make some selections here. I had already removed her leader, not making the same mistake that I made with Peachy back when I got her. But now I'm, making sure that I am pruning her in a way that she's going to grow properly. And this is tough with her because she is actually very close to my fence. So I want the branches to grow up and at a 45-degree angle, but I don't want these branches when they're full grown to hit my fence. So what I'm really trying to do, if you'll notice, when I make my top cuts, I'm making sure that the top cuts are no lower than my fence line so that when that little bud grows outwards,
it grows out and kind of above the fence. I want it to make kind of the puffy part of the tree heads above the fence and not hitting the side of the fence. So everything that I'm doing here is trying to make sure that it grows more towards the center and less towards the house and towards the fence. And if I do have to have it growing towards the fence, I want to make sure that the top cut I'm making has a bud that goes up and will direct up over the fence rather than hitting it. I hope that makes sense. There is a science to pruning fruit trees. I kind of look at it more like an art. It's about cutting them in such a way that you get them to grow in directions that you want them to grow. And sometimes they don't do what you want them to do, but a lot of times they will if you make those cuts properly. The last tree that we're going to trim is my elderberry. I meant to do this a long time ago. My elderberry tree, I wanted to be more of a bush style versus a tree. And what it's doing right now is it's growing as a tree. And I cannot get to the elderberry flowers that are at the top there. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and just trim the tops off. All the flowers that are up there are going to, die, obviously. But I'm hoping that when spring comes along, this will help it grow more bushy and less, this straight up vertical direction that it's going. Still a little bit on the tall side, but I'm just going to try this out and see how it goes. If I, have to get a ladder out this year, that's fine. Next year, I will do it differently. These grow from canes up through the ground, kind of like a blackberry. So maybe a different approach next year.
So we got Peachy pretty much all trimmed up. We also got the plum and then the elderberry over there all trimmed up really well. I'm honestly not sure what the situation is going to be with Peachy when it comes to the fact that she had flowers showing up now. It's not the right time. She still needs about a month. We haven't gotten enough chill hours for her to actually fruit. And we could still get a late frost and kill whatever flowers that are happening there. So I'm kind of hoping that by trimming her back and pruning her kind of hard, that it will force her to go back into dormancy at least for another month. If I could get another month of her getting into dormancy, get a few more chill hours, I think we might still have a chance for fruit. But if it doesn't work out, that is life. That is what it's like to be a gardener. You are at the whims of the weather. And this has been, I don't want to say a warm winter because it's been pretty cool, but it hasn't been cold enough. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and I will keep you updated on how Peachy's doing. Hit that notification bell and you'll be told every time I put out a new video, and then you can see if we get some peaches.